The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, translated by Ian Johnston. Part 1. One morning, as Gregor Samsa was waking up from anxious dreams, he discovered that in bed he had been changed into a monstrous, venomous bug. He lay on his armor back and saw, as he lifted his head up a little, his brown, arched abdomen divided into rigid, bow-like sections. From this height the blanket, just about ready to slip off completely, could hardly stay in place. His numerous legs, pitifully thin in comparison to the rest of his circumference, flickered helplessly before his eyes. Gregor wonders what had happened and realizes that he is not dreaming. The familiar items of his room, such as the sample cloth goods that he used for his job as a traveling salesman, seem to prove that he is awake. Gregor thinks that maybe going back to sleep will help, but he normally sleeps on his right side, and in his present condition, as a bug, he cannot roll onto his right side. He tries many times, closing his eyes as he doesn't have to see his many wiggling bug legs, but he always ends up on his hard, shell-like back. Gregor's thoughts turn to the stresses of his job, which include spending a lot of time traveling, eating bad food, and having poor relationships with people. He dislikes his job, but he keeps it because his parents owe his boss money. Realizing that he has overslept, he tries to think of what he can tell his boss. Then there is a knock on the door. It's Gregor's mother, who is reminding him of the time. Gregor responds, but he finds that his voice has changed. Gregor was startled when he heard his voice answering. It was clearly and unmistakably his earlier voice, but in it was intermingled, as if from below, an irrepressibly painful squeaking which left the words positively distinct only in the first moment and distorted them in the reverberation, so that one didn't know if one had heard correctly. Gregor wanted to answer in detail and explain everything, but these circumstances he confined himself to saying, "Yes, yes, thank you, mother. I'm getting up right away." Because of the wooden door, the change in Gregor's voice was not really noticeable outside, so his mother calmed down with his explanation and shuffled off. Gregor's father and sister, Greta, next knock on his door, asking if he's okay. Gregor tells them he is fine. He struggles to get out of bed, but his many limbs are ineffective at moving his large body. Gregor knows that soon someone from the office will come to the house to ask about him. He thinks it would be easy to get up if only he had someone to help him. Then there's a ring at the door of the apartment. Gregor knows that it must be someone from his office. This is confirmed when Gregor hears the visitor's voice. It is the office manager. Gregor is upset that someone at that level of management has come to his house because he is late to work. And more as a consequence of the excited state in which this idea put Gregor than a result of actual decision, he swung himself with all of his might out of the bed. There was a loud thud, but not a real crash. The fall was absorbed somewhat by the carpet, and in addition, his back was more elastic than Gregor had thought. For this reason, the dull sound was not quite so conspicuous, but he had not held his head up with sufficient care and had hit it. He turned his head, irritated and in pain, and rubbed it on the carpet. "Something has fallen in here," said the manager in the next room on the left. Gregor's sister whispers to him from the next room to let him know the manager is there. Then Gregor's father explains that the manager is there and wants to speak to him. The office manager begins to speak to Gregor, but Gregor's mother starts telling the manager what a good and devoted worker Gregor is, and that he is simply not feeling well. The manager says that business people have to get past illness. Gregor's father begins to lose patience and knocks on the door again. "So can Mr. Manager come in to see you now?" asked his father impatiently as he knocked once again on the door. "No," Gregor said. In the neighboring room on the left, a painful stillness descended. In the neighboring room on the right, his sister began to sob. The manager now raises his voice and, shouting, asks Gregor what's wrong and why he is locking himself in his room and only answering with yes and no. "I am speaking here in the name of your parents and your employer, and I am requesting you in all seriousness for an immediate and clear explanation." I am amazed. I am amazed. I thought I knew you as a calm, reasonable person, and now you appear suddenly to want to start parading around in weird moods. The chief indicated to me earlier this very day a possible explanation for your neglect. It concerned the collection of cash entrusted to you a short while ago. But in truth, I almost gave him my word of honor that this explanation could not be correct. However, now I see here your unimaginable pig-headedness, and I am totally losing any desire to speak up for you in the slightest. And your position is not at all the most secure. Originally, I intended to mention all this to you privately, but since you're letting me waste my time here uselessly, I don't know why the matter doesn't come to the attention of your parents. Your productivity has also been very unsatisfactory recently. Gregor says that he will open the door now and that he is suffering from a dizzy spell, which didn't allow him to get up. He asks the manager for patience and not to worry his parents, saying there is no basis for the criticism the manager is making. He says that he is feeling better and that the manager should go because he will report to the office shortly. But the manager can't understand what Gregor is saying, and he thinks he might be playing some kind of joke. Gregor's mother starts to cry and wonders if Gregor is really ill. She tells Greta to go and get the doctor. Greta's father tells the servant to go get a locksmith, or someone who could unlock the door. All right. People did not understand his words anymore, although they seemed clear enough to him, clearer than previously, perhaps because his ears had gotten used to them. But at least people now thought things were not all right with him and were prepared to help him. Gregor slowly moved toward the door. With a great effort, he is able to turn the key in the lock with his mouth. He opens the door, and the manager, seeing that Gregor is a giant insect, makes a shocked, "Oh," and backs away. Gregor's mother faints when she sees him, and Gregor's father at first clenches his fist as if he's going to push Gregor back into his room, but then covers his eyes with his hands and cries. Gregor remains calm and says that he will pack up his samples and head off to work. He tells the manager that he is not pig-headed and is happy to work. As the manager is leaving, Gregor makes a long speech. "Where are you going, Mr. Manager? To the office? Really? Will you report everything truthfully? Speaking up on my behalf in the office? People don't like traveling salesmen. People think they earn lots of money and thus lead a fine life. You also know well enough that the traveling salesman who is outside the office almost the entire year can become so easily a victim of gossip, coincidences, and groundless complaints against which it is impossible for him to defend himself." Gregor wants to catch the manager and stop him from leaving so he can calm him down and not lose his job. He pushes himself through the opening of the door and falls onto his many insect legs. Gregor realizes that this is the first time that morning that he has felt comfortable, and he is able to move as he wants. But as this movement, Mrs. Samsa stirs and springs up, saying, "Help! For God's sakes, help!" Then she hurries away. Meanwhile, the manager looks back one last time as he leaves. Gregor makes a movement to try to catch up to him. The manager senses this, so he leaps down over a few stairs and disappears. Mr. Samsa, who has been calm, is moved to action seeing the manager running away. He grabs the manager's cane, which has been left behind. With his left hand, his father picked up a large newspaper from the table and, stamping his feet on the floor, he set out to drive Gregor back into the room by waving the cane and the newspaper. No request of Gregor's was of any use. No request would even be understood. Gregor has had no practice moving backward on his new legs, so it's pretty slow going. He eventually turns himself around, and the door is too narrow for him, and he gets stuck. Gregor's father keeps driving him forward, however, with one big push forces him through the door and into the room. The tiny legs on one side hang twitching in the air above. The ones on the other side were pushed painfully into the floor. Then his father gave him one really hard, liberating push from behind, and he scurried, bleeding severely, far into the interior of his room. The door was slammed shut with the cane, and finally it was quiet.